Our next one. Okay, so this one is not technically an article. I didn't want to look for the article. It was you can't see it, but on the screen it's here. So I'm on X and I see this post from Greater Post, and it says Gen Z colon. Most boomers don't know what it's like to work 40 plus hours a week and still not be able to afford a home, per Fortune magazine. Now, Fortune magazine is run by old people. I'll give it that. But someone, another account called Power to the People, said this is the stupidest effing comment I have read in a while, and then it's all caps. Every generation worked way more than 40 hours a week. That's life. Get used to it. So now I'm a I am a big component of not using cartoons as examples, but it should be noted, I brings up a lot, that The Simpsons, which was created, I believe, in 1989, the concept of one dude working. Now, granted, he worked in a nuclear factory, dangerous work for sure. I'll give it that. But one dude working and owning a double, what's called a 2-story home, a garage, a car, a wife, and 3 kids. That was so normal that that was the standard for the family home. In 1989,
1980.
1989, one dude working bought a house. Now, again, nuclear stuff. So, I looked into it, and by looked into it, I asked Grok for sure. But I told Grok to, give me sources. And the sources the Grok uses was the SSA, National Average Wage Index, the FRD and Census Medium Home Prices. Let's see, some .org site, and then historical card transaction you got from like CPIU from BLS for inflation. Okay, so now I know you don't like averages, so I asked it for the mean. So we I took from now a lot of people don't know this. Boomers stretch from the 40s to the 60s. So theoretically, a boomer is someone who was born right after World War II, and by the time they're about 20, there are by 20 you're 20, you're in the workforce, you're buying homes, you're still in the 60s, and at that time, still 1960s, boomers quote unquote are being born. So, but I started the years off in 1960, 1980, 2000, and 2025. So, 1960, the mean salary was $4,000 a year. Adjusted to today's with today's inflation, that's $43,000 a year. A little less than the mean. The medium home in 1960 was $11,900. Adjusted to today's inflation, is $129,000 for a medium home price. The average new car was $2,200. In today's money, that's $24,000. 1980, 12,000 for median. In today's money, that's 48,000.
Let's pump the brakes real quick, just to do some quick ratios. So you said the average paycheck was around $4,000, which
Oh no,
translated to what?
per year. That's a salary.
Yeah, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
know.
Okay, yeah,
So average salary was 4K,
yeah.
and that translated to
So in today's money, it's about 10 times as much.
mhm, yeah, 40 grand. But I would like everyone to keep an eye on the ratios. All right, so this is your purchasing power parity. Um, you can make literally less money, but if the money goes further, you are proportionally wealthier. So inflation isn't the only thing that affects your purchasing power parity. A ton of things affect your purchasing power parity. If we look at the ratios here, right, a car costs about half of your annual paycheck, and a house costs a little more than 2x. This is what is it, like 2.5x your annual paycheck. So
Yeah.
that means that on a single paycheck, you could reasonably save So in proportion to today's money, um, that would look like now your average home now is like what, $300,000, $400,000.
Oh yeah,
So
actually,
are you
so
looking?
yeah, so we have
So yeah, but as
2025,
we go through
four
this,
hundred thousand
keep the
dollars.
ratios
Mm-hmm.
in your mind of, even if we're making more money than we would be adjusted for inflation, the ratios are what matter, right? Your purchasing power parity. If the cost of a loaf of bread was, 50 cents back in 1960, and it's $50 now, or just as an example, or it's $5 now, and that's a 10x price increase, but salaries have only gone up 2x, right? So your median salary now, I think, is like $71,000. Um, Even though 40 to 71,000, that's roughly 2x, a little bit less than 2x, but the cost of bread has gone from 50 cents to $5. Well, your purchasing power parity is down, even if you're doing better off than you would be just via inflation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's check out your bread example. So 50 cents to $5. That's a 10x increase. Now, the median salary from 1960 was 4,000. 2025 is 69,000. That's like a almost 20 times increase. However, if we adjust for, inflation, it's not even doubled. It was
Uh-huh.
43,000 in today's money
Uh-huh.
for 1960 to 2025. 70, like not even $70,000 is the median. People take averages. I know you don't like averages because that includes
Yeah.
everything. It's the main stuff
Yeah.
without the outliers. That's why we use mean. We haven't even doubled.
Yeah. Or this is why when you hear people say like the average salary, like, oh, if salary kept track with inflation, we'd be making, $100,000. Your average salary would be, 100 grand. Your average salary would be, 150 grand. And there, and you can do the math and you go, well, hold on, that isn't true, right? Like, I'm doing the math right now. If your average person was making, effectively $40,000 in 1960, and that number, they're making 4,000. Oh, that's about 40,000 now. And the average is 70,000. So maybe they were living a little bit harder. And it's like, yeah, but the purchasing power parity was astronomically higher. Like the
Yeah,
ability,
like
like a house was right. So if we're talking like, if assuming it were just based off of housing prices, if based off of just housing prices, we kept the same purchasing power parity, your average house is $400,000. That needs to be roughly 2 times your annual income, 2.5 times your annual income, which puts your standard annual income at nearly $200,000. What is that, $175,000 if it's 2.5 times? I'm not great at math off the top of my head, but you get the idea. Like your dollars, despite having more of them, will go less far. If you've ever been to like a great example, Europeans. This was a recent article I read, and I hate giving. As a true red-blooded American, I hate giving Euros their ups. But when I was in Europe, even though the euro was a slightly more valuable currency, right? The exchange rate was like 1 to 1.1 or 1 to like 1.3 or something. At the time I was there, it actually, in a lot of places, depending on where you were, even though the exchange rate was worse for you, you could actually go a little bit farther because that euro could actually had better purchasing power parity. The math works out kind of weirdly, but like you would pay like the equivalent of 28 USD for like a pretty decently nice dinner. Um, Whereas in the States, you might pay $30, right? Even though the exchange rate is worse, because the purchasing power parity of the euro in their markets is a lot better, that dollar goes even further. Um, so the reason I bring that up is like, I want to reiterate this as many times as I can. Keep in mind the raw numbers don't tell you the whole story. Even if we're showing you like, oh, they made, a little bit less money than we did. Remember, the ratios are what matter. You can have 100. This is like, you can have $100 million, right? You could have a ton of money, but if a loaf of bread is 100 grand, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Your purchasing power parity is what sort of is decisive of your ability to sort of live a good life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so like we'll just we're gonna go with the 1960 example what I'm about to give. Okay, so mean salary was 4,000. Median home was, we'll just say 12,000. We'll boost up the number, and new car was 2,000. Okay, you could theoretically live with your parents and split that payment in half. So all of your money, now granted, hopefully your parents would help you out, they'd keep you fed, but half of your paycheck goes to a
You're a
car,
boomer.
half
Your
of you,
parents are definitely helping you out here.
yeah,
And then you're going to say you did it all on your own.
yeah, half of it goes to the car, half of it goes to the house payment. You will pay off that car. Now you're making both payments. You will pay off that car in a year. You will own that house in 3 years. Sorry, no, not 3 years. You will own that house in 6 years.
Mhm.
And that's assuming
And that's
that
assuming,
you don't buy,
yeah,
yeah,
you have,
you buy a new car every year.
yeah, it's,
Just 6 years. Now, granted, there's interest rates, but whatever. Well, that's beside the point.
sure, right, this might not be like a perfect one-to-one example, but like if you were, this is why when they talk about like, you could pay for college, in a summer, it was because even though it was maybe a similar portion of their paycheck, the other parts of their life were so much less expensive. So much. Housing was so, I cannot iterate to you how dirt cheap housing used to be in the United States. Like, and also we kind of have had slightly different housing conventions back then. There's people kind of settled for a little bit less. There are other things that cause the price of stuff to go up, but like not the, what is it, 500x? Houses have not gotten 500 times better in the past.
Yeah.
Would be from the 60s, 80 years, like or 60 years since the 60s. We're in, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like it's not it's not 500 times better. It might be, you know what? I could say the houses might have gotten like 2 times better, right? There's central heating and air, and it's gotten really good. We don't use asbestos in the wall, so you're not dying of cancer. Although, like, you can make complaints about like construction crews and the quality of like certain parts of construction going up and down. But like broadly, a decent new home is probably twice as good as a home built in the 60s. That just seems to be disregarding like architectural stuff. When I say architectural stuff, I mean like design. The modern house might look more boring, but from a technical perspective, it's probably a 2 times better house. So, I could see a 2x price, not a 500x. And that's at best. Like this is my at best being as maximally generous as I can. When in reality, I really don't think houses are 2x better. I think they're maybe, 0.3x better. That actually doesn't make sense. It'd be like 1.3x or 1.1x. Like I really don't think houses have gotten so much meaningfully better that they demand this huge premium. Well, that really any product has gotten so much better that they demand this massive, enormous markup. And yeah, like as you were saying, like you could have your house paid off, and this is assuming. And you said, you're living with your parents, you could have the car paid off. That's assuming you finance the car. If you're working a full-time job and you're living with your parents, you can outright buy the car after working for 6 months. And to be
Mm-hmm.
clear, we're not saying a car, right? Any car, Facebook Marketplace, go talk to some local guy. A brand new, off the lot car, brand new.
Mm-hmm.
Just you can walk onto a lot, buy a full brand new car. You know what the average cost of a brand new car is today?
According to this thing, around 50K.
$50,000. You need to work for at least 8 months on the average salary, as
And
opposed
that's
to
all
6.
going to it.
And it's all going to just the car, let alone a down payment on a house, right? So, and let's do like, how do down payments work, right? You put down the principal or you put down a down payment, and then you've got the principal and you've got the interest, have to pay off as you go. What's a down payment usually on a house? What percent of the house?
Okay, so before Bill Clinton, I believe in the 90s said you could do 0% down. I think it was required that you had either 20,
E-
25% or even 33%.
for 33%. So a house that's 2.5 times, we'll call it 3 times your annual salary. The down payment, right,
Mm-hmm.
was effectively your annual salary. So you live with mom and dad for a year and a half, and you can put a down payment on a house and be driving a brand new car.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm sure that this is possible for some people in some parts of the country. I'm not saying that this whole thing is completely evaporated, but you, even making $70,000 a year, could not in a year put down 100 grand, which is a down payment on a $300,000 house, which is still beneath market average. And this again, and we're assuming, right, that you're doing this in any part of the country, right?
Yeah.
This is the part that should, if you're a younger person, this is the part that should upset you more than any other part of this. You're right. You can make that thing happen in the middle of. Do we swear on this podcast?
Yeah, we can swear.
Okay, in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, South Dakota. You could do it. You could go to somewhere, no man's land, Nebraska. Find a house that's like 200 grand. All right, so now all you need is like, it's a third of 200 grand, like $75,000. Is my math way off?
A third of 200 grand.
Either way,
Yeah, you're around right. Yeah.
right around 80
Around-
grand.
Yeah.
That's your yearly salary, right? You could buy I would say the cheap Kias, but Kias have gotten expensive. The cheapest, like you could get a Kia Soul, new off the lot. Actually, I kind of want to Google this right now to make sure I'm not being insane because I don't know how expensive Kia Souls are.
Okay,
Full
go
new
you
price.
Do that. I'm gonna talk about. So we say that for the 60s. Now let's say a boomer was born in the 60s and they're gonna get into the workforce in the 80s. So they're, what's it called? They're 20 something years old. They're in the workforce. It's practically the same thing, except you're gonna be working. You're gonna be working about 2 extra years. That's assuming you buy a new car every year.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find the price of that Kia?
Yeah, so $20,000 for a new Kia Soul, which is actually a little bit less than I was anticipating. But you can get a Kia Soul, right? All right, you've got your brand new Kia Soul after working for about half a year, little less than. And then to put the down payment on this house, you got to work for another year. Congratulations. You lived out the boomer dream of getting a brand new car, fully paid for. And this is pretending that you didn't have debt in college. And you now own a home. You have permanently, perhaps not permanently, but very seriously capped your lifetime earnings by choosing to live in middle of nowhere, Nebraska. Congratulations, you checked all the boxes, and your reward for that is to be stuck in low-level mediocrity for the rest of your life. Now, the boomer, he didn't have to make this decision. The boomer grew up in Anaheim, California, and could do that same thing. In Anaheim, California, he grew up in Brooklyn and could do that same thing in Brooklyn. He grew up in Miami, and he could do that in Miami. He grew up in, I don't know any of the boroughs in Chicago, but he lived in Chicago, and he could do that in Chicago. Like, this is their economic opportunity caps were very different, right? They weren't making this decision of, okay, do I try to live out the American dream of buy a car, buy a brand new car, do all this other stuff. They didn't have to make that trade-off of having that or being a brokey, but in a city with a lot of economic opportunity, right? There was no trade-off. It was, you could do this just kind of anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that there wasn't some level of price disparity. Obviously, California's a little bit more expensive. New York was a little bit more expensive. Florida, Illinois, right? These Texas were all a little bit more expensive. But like
You're
this
also
was
getting paid
still when
more.
new housing, yeah. But you'd also be getting paid a little bit more. So it kind of also, which is true now, right? You get paid more to live. Like your average salary in New York, I think was like $140,000, and it's like, in any other part of the country, that's not a terrible income, right? If you're in the middle of like, nowhere Tennessee, that's pretty good. That's pretty solid. But if you're, oh, I don't know, in like a big economic center where everyone wants to be, because there's no new housing, because of a whole litany of other reasons, and purchasing power parity being a lot lower, like you're not, your economic opportunity is either limited by the amount of money you can make, right? So either you are living the dream in a place no one dreams of, or you're in a place people dream of, struggling to make ends meet on what is ostensibly a good salary, because it's so difficult and exclusive to live there when this wasn't as much of a decision that people had to make in the past. Um, but yeah, like it's nuts.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, like, it's not even to the point where we're like, oh, again, like the comment that really got me was that like every generation worked more than 40 hours. I watched
Yeah,
this
I,
one. Oh, I'm getting an echo. I watched this one YouTuber called the Minority Mindset, and he always has a break off after the 80s, because in the 80s, like as I stated in the beginning of The Simpsons, one person working, you got it done. You could do it. But
uh
then after the
that
80s,
sorry, I was gonna jump in and add on to
oh,
that.
you
Yeah,
could
that's
keep
the
it.
other part we didn't talk about. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about single young person who's going out and trying to start life for themselves. They could raise a family on this. Do you know how expensive it is to feed even just 3 people on a single salary? The answer is very. Let alone the average family size was, I think, like 4 or 5 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could, there was just so, the abundance was unreal.
Oh
It
yeah.
wasn't like Johnny's struggling, but he has a house and a car, and maybe finally he can start his life. This was like, um, it was Ted and Llewellyn, who now had their 2 kids, Roger and Sherry, in Bakersfield, California, and that was just everyone there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then yeah, single dude by yourself doing that. But then in Minority Mindset, after the 80s, or it might be around 2000s, he makes the point where it's like the income has, like, both of you have to be working. And I believe he
Hmm.
stated that in 2020, no, this is like 2023, 2024. It's gotten worse for sure, but he stated that combined, you both have to be bringing home to. Again, he uses averages, so we'll forgive him for that. But the average you both are bringing in total has to be at least $120,000 to afford the average home,
Hmm.
which the mean salary is 70,000. That's fair, but I even think that's a little, in my opinion, that's a little high. For example, I make 3 times the
They don't.
minimum wage in my state. I don't even think I'm hitting that.
Hmm. Well, on top of that, like this is one of those statistics where it's like this is of the only people who are being pulled are the ones working. If we weighted it against all the unemployed people, or the people like your U3 unemployment, which is people who are currently actively seeking employment, and blah 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 blah. Like what is it? U6 is like the broadest. Um, like if we included even just U3 unemployment in this number, it's like I guarantee you would watch it go way down. And then if you probably broke it out by generations, you'd probably see the most. You probably see a lot more. You probably do still see a ton of wealth disparity, obviously, between generations, with the boomers being the wealthiest generation and Gen X or Gen Z being the poorest. Sans Gen Alpha, because I don't think they're old enough to start working in mass. Um, but what you probably also see is this is a speculation, but I would speculate that that Gen Z probably has the highest intra um, generational wealth disparity. Like I would have, I would imagine that the Gen Z who are working were actually probably making a pretty decent income, and there's also just more of them who aren't working, period. Because
Mm-hmm.
the process to get to that income is a much more gruesome and grueling road um, than it was in the past. And oh yeah, this is another thing. Access is this is something that we might touch on a little bit more later. But just for now, keep in mind. You ever heard that piece of boomer advice? You know, the firm handshake. Just walk in, hand them your resume, tell them you'd like to work there. Give them a
Yeah.
firm handshake. They'll
Mm-hmm.
get you an interview. They give that advice not because they're trying to be mean to you, although I imagine they have a little bit of that sadistic pleasure, um, but because that's what they did. So to all of the younger people listening to this who are, the 9 rounds of interviews that give you homework and that require, 7 years of experience and a master's and a 4.0 GPA, even though you've been out of college for, 3.5 years, um, and want to see your high school transcripts, and you have to try to find a way to sneak past the AI agent to finally talk to a person, maybe eventually in a billion years. Those are your barriers to getting a job that doesn't pay proportionally as well, that gives you less access, that requires that you do the additional job of going out to find a partner, which, I mean, for most people is relatively is comparatively a full-time job. Um, like you're working 2 jobs, the find the partner job and the real job. And then your reward for that is to live a life that is vaguely comparable to one that a single guy could have lived 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Because his access to that money, not just was there more money and the money went, or not just was the money more powerful, so it went further. So even though he had less, he had more. But his access to that money, the barriers to access were so much lower. He wasn't jumping through 1,000 hurdles. And that college degree really did open so many doors. Um, like so many doors. This is why and it's still largely true advice about if you don't know what you're doing, go get a college degree. This is why they used to say it doesn't matter what. Go to college, get a degree, it doesn't matter what degree. Because one, it was a little bit more exclusive, and even if it wasn't, it told people something about you, right? Oh, you can put in work, right? You can show up, you can be consistent, you can be a good employee, blah 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 blah. And for a large number of reasons, that heuristic became less strong or less valuable, or companies post 2008 got very used to being able to say, we want years of experience in the industry because of when the markets go down, you want to hire safer employees, not riskier employees, and college grads are riskier employees because you have to train them, and that requires investment from the company. So it's easier to just pick someone else from the industry who's already been trained and already kind of knows what they're doing. Point being, they got that college degree. And then, unironically, that was a really amazing tool to get them any job anywhere. Maybe not any job, right? You're not walking and becoming a senior, manager or a C-suite
Yeah.
executive instantly. But it was great at getting you any entry level job, and you probably got better than entry level pay because there's just a higher portion of the population. And this is the more insane part, right? We're talking about access. We're talking about how many doors this college degree opened for you. That was because it was on some level notable that you went to a college, because however much those jobs are master's required or equivalent graduate degree with 4.0 GPA from high school onward, blah 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 blah. 7 years of experience in the industry, 9 rounds of interviews, homework that you have to do that takes you 20 hours, paid, but paid at a third of, and then we'll maybe offer you the job, and then we offer you the job, we're going to tell you the salary only then. You have no idea what you're even competing for right up until the very end, when we basically know that you're hooked and know that you can't basically know that you're basically not choosing anywhere else. So then we can just kind of throw whatever number we want at you. High schooler, 18 years old, fresh out of high school. Prom was 6 weeks ago. Would be handed that job if you walked in the front door and shook someone's hand. Like, this is the disparity in levels of access. I knew this guy. This is a bit of a tangent. I knew this guy when I worked at a gun range. 68. He was like 68. He was a boomer, maybe very young boomer, but a boomer. And he might have been older than 68. I think he was born in like the 50s, late 50s. So he was growing up in like the 60s and 70s. He rode motorcycles all around California, doing drugs. You know, the classic like boomer Eagles like blaring on the radio experience, right? He ended up working for some like mid-sized business and like cashed out on his shares in the company. And dude, he had like, I don't know the exact amount of money to throw him, but he had a lot of money to throw around. Like, he was doing this as a hobby job. Like, the guns he would come in with, the car he would drive, like, it was just, this guy had cash. And he spent so much of his younger years just goofing off. And then he could just turn around and get a job. Just, whoop, all right, job time now. I'm done. I'm bored. You know, I've had my pre-work siesta. Let's go make some cash. Hey, mister, you want to give me a job that can get me a car, a house, a wife, and kids? Well, sure, buddy. Why not? Boom. Check. Done. And that was it. And there's obviously some problems with the system, the weaker background checks, there's probably more scamming going on. But, like, just, you could do that stuff. And then, with the UE, and immediately be, he's a respectable businessman, and look at me, I'm Mr. Job Man, and I'm making the money. And oh, what's that? You want to offer me stake? You want to offer me stock in the company? Well, sure. Golly gee, I guess I'll take it. Cash out 60 years later, $6 million richer. Oh, and by the way, you and all your boomer buddies have made the housing market inaccessible. So now your little ranch house is worth $7.8 million because you got there before everyone else. And he said no one else can build. So now you cashed out on your stocks, you cashed out on that, and you moved to some other part of the country, or you basically trade houses with some boomer on the opposite coast. And you just, oh, this is great. I love my life. And now to even get just a vague facsimile of that, you need a master's degree, a spouse, no children, and that's just any master's degree. You need a master's degree in a decent field, a spouse with a master's degree in a decent field, and then you both manage to navigate all the way through interviews, all those others, get those jobs. And only then keep those jobs. So we're talking 12 years of schooling. So we have the traditional 12 years of schooling, K through 12, and then really now it's basically 18 years of schooling because everyone's trying to get their kids started early. You have your 12 years of schooling plus an additional 4, plus an additional 2 to 4. So we're already at 20 years of school, plus 12 months of job interviews and process and blah, 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 blah. In which time you need to have found a spouse who is also in a comparably paid field to get a job, to then live in Nowheresville, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And you both have to put up money to get a down payment on the house, and you need to either split a car or drive used cars, and there's nothing wrong with any of these things in particular, right? I'm not saying that these are necessarily bad things, right? Except for maybe needing a spouse to pay for stuff. Like if
yeah.
I think that's a different part. But like, not that women shouldn't work, but if you and your wife are working, you should be living like gods, okay?
Yeah.
That's my position.
I know that you're paying off college debt. We can't forget that part.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you're paying off college and master's debt because, oh my gosh, masters aren't cheap. So the hope is that hopefully you can get a job out of college that will pay for that master's. Good luck with that. So then you and your spouse are now both deeply in debt. Maybe, hopefully, just one of you, but probably both of you, that you're paying off so you can live in, Nowheresfield, Oklahoma. And David, Hornthau could do it in California on a GED. He could do all of what you're doing, make equivalent pay. He could support his wife and his kids in like Long Beach, California on a GE, or in Orange County, California on a GED or military income. Like,
Yeah.
what? It's. But moving on to the 80s.
I mean, for the 80s, is again, it's essentially the same thing. Now, wages went up 3 times. This is like from 60s to the 80s. Went up 3 times. The housing went up slightly more than 3 times. Cars went up slightly less than 3 times. No. It was about 3 times. So so between the 60s and 80s, right when the final boomers are entering the market, it's prices are still relatively the same. You know what I mean? Now, granted, I think as I stated earlier, let's say you did the whole living with your parents for what's called for a year, and
Yeah,
then
year and a half.
you split your payments. You would have that car paid off in a year, and then you would have that home paid off in like what was it? In about
6 years.
Yeah, 6 to 8 years, and that's with you buying a new car every year. So you could have 6 to 8 brand new cars. Well, that's brand new. You're driving them, obviously, but you know what I mean. So relatively the same. And then from the 80s to the 2000s, that's where we get a. I mean, it's still relatively the same ish. Like from you get 12,000 to 32,000. So almost 3 times. The housing went from 47 to 120. So that was over 3 times, but not too far off, I admit. And the cars went from 16 to 18,000, so about 3 times. So the gap is getting wider, but it's still achievable, if that makes sense. Then we get from now, granted, 2000 to 2025. That's an extra 5 years, but whatever. Went from 30, though salaries went from 32,000 to 69,000. Nice. That's a little over 2 times. Housing went from 119,000 to over 400,000. That's 4 times increase. So your salary went up 2, your houses went up 4. Your cars went from 18,000 to 50,000. That is a 2.5 increase. So your wages have barely doubled. Everything else has the cars doubled, houses quadrupled. Now, this segment's long enough. I could get into why I think everything's exploding. Well, everything's going up, wages aren't going up. But I've stated stuff on the previous episode. Zero interest rate policy, no down payment policy. But before we move on, there was one thing I want to note. I do have a note here that's interesting. According to my sources, since the late 1970s, so even like boomers born in the 60s are practically in the workforce, and boomers before them are like head of those workforces now. During the 70s, they're already like 30, going on 40. So
They don't like to tell you. Yeah, they don't like to tell you this, but Mad Men isn't a period drama. It was a documentary.
Yeah, so around this time, they're starting to at least become in charge of the, I would say means of production kind of stuff. So my sources tell me that since the 1970s, worker production has steadily risen, meaning that you are working more, maybe not working more, but you're producing more, but hourly compensation has largely stagnated since the 70s, leading to a massive gap between the wealth created by workers and the wages they receive. I'm not gonna. No, I'll diss on like I would say like 80% of boomers. I'll say that. So since the 70s, around the time they started getting in charge of these large companies, their wages are going up because they're getting more products sold. Workers their wages are staying relatively the same. Houses are going up because zero interest rate policies, no down payment policies, and cars are going up because technology. So I'm not giving boomers a pass, but cars are still going up. But again, this section's long enough. And I think we've dumped on boomers quite a bit. Well, okay, I don't want to say boomer. We didn't dump on boomers. We dumped on power to the people who had the crazy idea that every generation worked more than 40 hours, and I, of course, and like maybe they worked more than 40 hours, but at least one person could work more than 40 hours, own a home, brand new car, feed their family, live comfortably,
Also,
1-2 vacations
also,
a year.
Also, it's not true. I don't remember where I saw it. It was some study. Uh, I'll Google it in a second, but I was pretty sure I saw a study that found that like your average worker in like from like 1940 to like 1980 something only did actually about 35 hours of work a week. Like there was like the 40-hour work week was only kind of a 40-hour work week with smoke breaks and all this other stuff. Like you are not working actually 40 hours. It was less than that, and it's only since post-internet. And this is, mind you, this is all when everything was physical and media was physical. When you used paper and pencils and pens and all this, work was so much less invasive of your life and your personal space. Work from home was great. Lots of people like work from home. If you are not great about your own boundaries, work from home is so unbelievably invasive. If you were in your car and you didn't have a car phone, your work was never getting a hold of you. You were in the car. You were driving. You were away from home. If people didn't know where you were, well,
Even
guess what?
then,
You were just gone. And
like
you just Don Drapered it and you showed up, on work on Monday and they're like, hey, we tried to get a hold of you. It's like, oh, sorry, it's out for the weekend with my parents. Did I not tell so and so? No, well, don't leave us like that again, man. It's like, oh yeah, no problem, dude. Like now your boss has instant, constant access to you all of the time. They can send you work documents. If you have, like, they give you a laptop, they give you a phone. If you're lucky, maybe, or they might, if you're unlucky, they'll ask you to use yours. Um, and now they can just send you work at any time. And on all of this, while it's not necessarily, well, you won't get, like, you can clock in for this, but I'm sure as a lot of people know, like, um, by enforcing the fact that you get paid for all of the work that you do, you will likely not keep a job for very long, right? Doing voluntary work does have a place in a workplace. I'm not fully against, like, you should never, take on extra roles. You should never blah, 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 blah. I think there's a time and a place for it. But in the past, doing that stuff genuinely showed like initiative and all this other stuff because it was physical. Maybe people couldn't, invade your personal life as much. But now that your personal life can be instantly invaded by your boss, it went from you making an effort to do extra work to the boss now having the ability to make you do extra work for no pay because the barrier to access to you is so much lower. It used to be you had to really go out of your way to get your workers to go do additional things for you, so it just kind of wasn't worth your time. And anyone stepped up was like really making your life easier. Now it's a short text. Hey, I need you to come in on Monday. Hey, I got documents for you to review. Send. Dude, I'm at home. I'm at my pool, dude, or whatever. You don't own a pool. You're at your parents' pool if you're lucky.
Yeah. Or your
Or the public pool if you're having a great time, right? Yeah, or you're outside of someone's house who owns a pool.
Outside of a
Behind the
boomer's
fence,
home.
secretly. Yeah, I'm outside of your pool, dude. Like it went from it meant something for you to do it to now it's basically it's there's no really good comparison for it, but it's like the difference between you going out of your way to do something nice for someone else and someone making a demand of you, right? Doing extra work has gone from going out of your way to really show how invested you are to a new kind of like demand that can just be made of you. Maybe not at the risk of losing your job, but definitely at the risk of getting passed over for like management positions and whatnot. Like now it can be asked of you. Before, asking it of you was a big ask. Now it's a small ask. We'll just review these documents. I just sent them over to you. Check your email.
You're already at home.
Yeah, you're already at your computer. Just do it.
You have your
It's
email
so
on your
simple.
phone.
Right? Now it's like a death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah. So again, this segment's long enough. So Again, power to the people. I don't know who runs his account. You seem like a retired FDYN MAGA. Yeah, that sounds about right. Um, so, based on the evidence we've seen today, yeah, I'd say that boomers did have it easier. The fact that Gen Z can't work more than 40 hours, and yeah, that's the thing. Gen Z will work more than 40 hours and still not have the home. But besides the point, I think we've made a great statement here.